like pre-COVID times. And so our office had talked about trying to create more opportunities for counselors just to be aware of different opportunities and resources. So this is the first one that we're hosting. We may try to do some other types of trainings in the future, but I get a lot of questions about advising and testing from counselors, and I recognize that it's really a big undertaking, especially if you're new, to just kind of wrap your arms around college advising for your students who are pursuing college classes through Pikes Peak, as well as other institutions possibly. So I just wanted this to be a resource for everyone. So I'm going to spend a little time going over different resources and tools that you can use to help advise students, some kind of like best practices, strategies I use for advising students, but we do have kind of a smaller group. So I am open to questions as we go along, and then I'll leave time at the end for a Q&A as well. So yeah, just more or less talking about resources for advising, a few resources for placing students into classes, or if you have questions about that. And then there's a lot of students that can test into classes using like AP or IB scores that are like college class equivalents. And so I get questions about that as well. So if you all do anyone have questions before we get started? Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And the first thing that I'm going to show you is just our course catalog, because I think that that is really the main place that I start, especially because we have, nearly 200 programs at Pikes Peak, and students can participate in so many of them. So that is what I'm going to show you first, as soon as I find the button. I'm going to put this in the chat as well so that you can explore it. So this is our catalog at Pikes Peak. We do have printed copies of our catalog, but often they're obsolete really as soon as they're printed. A prerequisite changes for a class, a new program gets created. And so for me, I don't really use the hard copies. I just use this for any time I'm trying to support a student or understand what they need to do in order to earn their degree. So really the place I go the most, there's a ton of information on here as well about like academic probation or just different policies that we have at Pikes Peak as well. So if you're looking for policy information, that can also be found here. But more or less, I'm using the degrees and certificates tab more than anything. Students come to me with all different kinds of interests and future goals, whether they just want to get a standalone certificate or degree and then enter the workforce, or if they're trying to transfer degrees onto other institutions. And so this is where we can kind of narrow down, do we have the right program for them? What are the different choices they can choose from? And then what are the requirements if they want to move forward with the different options that we have? So I'll go through this a little bit. Our Associate of Arts programs, if they use the language with designation, it's intended to transfer to another institution. Colorado has statewide guaranteed transfer agreements between community and state colleges and four-year institutions. So if these students are following the with designation perfectly, then everything, all 60 credits, is going to transfer on to participating public institutions in Colorado. And there's another site that I can show you about that. So that sometimes students are like, I don't know what that means with designation, but that's what it means. It's intended to transfer on. So we have quite a few different choices in that realm. So often I get students who are just trying to pursue that transfer degree. So with that, you can select any program and you can see every single class that's required in order to earn that degree or certificate. And my goal is to try to get students as far forward as they can, if possible. And everybody can see this okay, right? We're all good? Okay. So for example, these students need to take, your written communication, a math course, arts and humanities, history, social and behavioral sciences, natural sciences, and additional courses. So sometimes this doesn't give like as much information as sometimes people are looking for because it's so broad. It doesn't list your examples here of what you can take for arts and humanities. So if your student is has applied to Pikes Peak and has a student number, they can log into their student portal and they can log into what's called Degree Check. And so this is another tool that I use. And so as counselors, you don't have like a advisor facing feature of this, but if a student logs into their portal, they can access this Degree Check and you can walk through different degree options with them where it's giving you a little bit more information. Like this is a good starting point, but I do think that using the Degree Check feature is also really critical in helping students really understand what their options are. So let me see if I can put mine in. So this is what this program looks like. And so I'm just using myself as an example. So when students apply to Pikes Peak, they have to choose a major. And so whatever major they've chosen, whether it's a certificate or a degree, it's going to populate in this. And I'm going to show you how to access this with a student. Because again, counselors can't access this on their own. This is something that you can walk through with a student if they're on a computer or a tablet or Chromebook with you. When they log into their student portal, they have this button right here on the main page called Degree Check, and that takes you exactly to this location. And so that would be my recommendation if they're really wanting to dive in. What credits have already applied toward this major, perhaps, and helping them pick classes moving forward. So I'm non-degree seeking. I'm not working on anything right now. So sometimes I have students that are like, well, what if I change my major? What if I want to pursue, let's see, no majors. Let's find an example. Let's do an Associate of Applied Science. And so this is where you can see every single program that we offer at Pikes Peak. So I don't necessarily have to pick from here. I can pick any type of program that we offer. So you do have to kind of know what you're looking for, but they would all be broken down again on our catalog. And we only got to the Associate of Arts, but here's all our Associate of Science, General Studies, Applied Science, and then our certificates. So what should I pick? So many choices. So maybe I want to choose biology, Associate of Science, biology. So I could go Associate of Science, biology, degree with designation, meaning it's intended to transfer. And the report will run. If I had taken any credits at Pikes Peak, it would now be plugging them into this new degree plan so students can see if they're losing credits or if everything is transferring in or how many credits they have left to finish. So this is a 60 credit program, 0 credits applied. And so this is where it gives you like your exact classes that you need. Whereas in the catalog, it's kind of saying you have to choose 3 from this huge list of classes. It's actually going to list out all of those classes here. So when we were looking at that psychology program, it just said you needed 2 arts and humanities, but didn't indicate what your list of choices were. So if you log into this with a student, it gives you more information on what those classes actually are that they have to choose from. Right now, since our registration has not opened for spring, if you were looking at this on Monday, the 21st, it would outline, once you click on a class, the selections, the choices. It doesn't break down what campus it's going to be at is the only thing, but it will tell you if they're offered. So and this is why advising gets really tricky because often you're looking for information in multiple places where maybe your student wants to take art appreciation and here. So it's just listing for fall right now that there's only an online option. So there's, and And when the classes indicate that the capacity is 99, that always means it's online, and it often means that it's not taught by a Pikes Peak instructor. It's taught by someone who works for the community college system in Colorado. So I often hear from students that they have a hard time connecting with these instructors because I don't have any ability to get connected with the instructor on the student's behalf, and they don't work for Pikes Peak. And sometimes it's just a very hands-off teaching style, and students are just expected to learn the material independently and be successful. So with our high school students, especially, I always caution them with these classes just because there is a lack of support often that exists. So if they'd wanted to take it this semester, that would have been their only choice for this class. And so often that's how I begin to build a schedule with a student is when are these classes offered, of course, do they align with your schedule at the high school? And like, are you able to transport yourself, to the different campuses, or is an online option better for you? So there's a lot of variables at play as we go through this. Does anyone have any questions before I move on? Okay. So this is something that I use all the time. So I'm often first, I'll kind of recap. I'm going into the catalog, reviewing the different program options with students that we offer, reviewing if the classes that are listed seem of interest or if there's a lack of information, going into their degree check, and then looking further and deeper into what classes exactly are needed for that program. So if we go back to like what the catalog shares for biology, again, it's just showing you need 2 arts and humanities courses, and it gives you lots and lots of examples. Often, sometimes I don't always see that these are listed, but if you want more information, you can also go into the student's degree check with them and see exactly what has plugged into their degree and what may also be lacking. So this is good that they're at least outlining them more explicitly here, but sometimes I've noticed it's not always the case in our catalog. When I'm advising students for health science programs, because I know a lot of students are often working on the prerequisites in order to do like surgical technology, radiology technology, nursing. We have a new dental hygiene program and an associate's degree. And so often those can get a little trickier with advising. And I do sometimes refer students to our health science advisors, especially if they're getting close to finishing the prerequisites, just so they can understand the forthcoming application process that will come for them and all other requirements that are needed in addition to having done all of the prerequisite classes. So I'm more than happy to talk to students about, let me pull up one. Like the completing the prerequisites for radiology technology, but I know my limitations as an advisor, and I'm not an expert in the actual, like once you're admitted to the program or going through the application process for the program. So I don't have any reservations with referring a student to another advisor on campus, where that is what they do. They advise our health science students all day. But I can certainly talk to them about before you can even apply to these programs, you need to complete these classes, for example. And so what I do like about the catalog is it does indicate what the prerequisites are for classes. So if the students need a corresponding math or English score, or if they need to take another, like for example, you can't take human anatomy and physiology until you've taken Bio 1111, which is that like foundational general college biology with lab. So, and so here's where, if the student needs to start with biology 1111, they do have to demonstrate college readiness in English and college readiness in quantitative literacy math. But one thing with our catalog is it does not explain what that means. And so I get a lot of questions from counselors, and this has come up for me too, where I'm trying to make sure that a student is able to actually register for these classes. So if a student doesn't have test scores on file with Pikes Peak that show that they've met this, they can use PSAT scores, SAT scores, high school transcripts. They can use AccuPlacer, which is taken at Pikes Peak, or if any of you are certified to administer the AccuPlacer, you can offer it on site at your school. And we can talk more about that if you're interested in working through that. But that's the next step, is making sure the student has those test scores, and then either the counselor, the school, or the student needs to send those to me so I can get those input into their account. So in most cases, students are testing with SAT scores. So college readiness for it's basically mastery, if that's something that I think everyone's enforcing at their schools. So if they've demonstrated mastery with SAT with a 470 English and a 500 SAT for math, then they are able to register for Bio 1111 once I have their SAT scores on file. But they can also use their high school transcripts. We can use the completion of junior level English with a B or better, and Algebra 2 B or better both semesters. So there's multiple ways that students can place into classes. So often I'm like, okay, if you don't have your SAT scores, let's look at your transcripts. If we don't have it on your transcripts, maybe consider taking the AccuPlacer or the EdReady through Pikes Peak. So I don't want students to have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops or get test fatigue from trying to place in. But if they're willing to try multiple ways and they feel like they're going to be successful in the class, they can certainly attempt multiple ways to take the courses. Let me show you. There's a couple different course placement documents that we share with high school counselors. I think this one might be the most commonly used. And so this is how you can see the different ways that students can place into their classes. So this is where it doesn't really break down. I'm going to show you this one. This one's kind of scary, and it's hard to really dive into. In this way, I have this printed out at my desk, but this is more or less all of the different options that students have to place into multiple classes at Pikes Peak. So AccuPlacer, ACT, SAT, EdReady, and high school transcripts. So if students are trying to place into that quantitative literacy that we saw in the catalog, that's how I know they can do Algebra 2 or higher from their high school transcripts with a B or better, or that 500 math. And so this document is on our records webpage, and it updates a lot. So I think I've shared this with a couple counselors perhaps, but there are changes that come. And so often using what's on our website is going to be the most effective, because little things change. For example, like one of the things we talked about at our partner meeting was that the EdReady can no longer be used to place into pre-calculus. And students have to score 100 instead of a 90 in order to place into their classes. So I think I might even be looking at, like, I just know in my head that that's what's changed. So when I share these, like, it is possible that they could change if we're not going by what's on the website. So this for me was like really hard to wrap my head around when I first started, because there's just like this whole menu of options of how students can place into their classes. But if ever you're not sure, you can always contact high school programs or me directly just to say, I'm not sure if this student is able to take this class, or you can share their scores and we can evaluate them for you to determine if the student can move forward into the classes that they're wanting to take. So a lot of our classes do not require prerequisites, but all of our math and science and English classes will require some demonstration of college readiness. And often that can be the best way to know if a student is a good fit for the concurrent enrollment program or should move forward. If they're showing scores to you that meet college readiness. Different districts have different policies on what they're like how they're expecting students to portray with their scores in order to participate. But from my standpoint, if they're meeting the academic requirements to participate in the class that they're interested in, like there's no reason that we would not allow them to participate. We have a lot of homeschool students. I also work with our homeschool student population, and I always recommend for our homeschool students, if they're not taking, if they haven't taken the SAT, that they take the AccuPlacer. Just as a check and balance. Like I don't want their first experience in college to be negative or like, not help like discourage them from feeling like they are, capable of completing college. So I want this program to be really, really a good experience for them and build their self-esteem and confidence as they continue to move forward with college and not feel like they had to withdraw their first semester or they got a W or couldn't complete. Like that's never the outcome that I want for a student. So with that, making sure that they're demonstrating the readiness for their classes is important. And I will say, since we're on science, I have a hard time placing students into science, not because of the test score requirement, but because of the lab and the lecture component. It often pulls them out of their high school class for half a day, at least one day a week. And with the bell schedule and different commitments, it just often doesn't work unless they're taking the class at night or if they have a ton of free periods or off periods. So those can be hard for students. And we have these like pre-nursing students who are trying to get all of these biologies done. And, that'll take a few semesters to work through, biology, general college biology, move on to human anatomy 1 and then 2. So I try to set them up for success with planning for that and fitting these rigorous college classes around everything else that they have in their schedule. I will pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I know some of the programs, or at least some of the classes within the programs, have age minimums. Like the EMT program. Is there to figure out where those age minimums are?
Typically, sometimes you have to, that's a great question, dig in a little bit more into like their department website. But I know for sure for our health science programs, any of these require, you can do any of the prerequisites in high school, but you have to be 18 to actually participate in the, like you can't start working on your RTE courses until you finished high school and are 18. But nursing, like CNA, you can complete as young as 16. And I did have a lot of back and forth with EMT last week about this. Like some students who are a senior in high school, they will allow 17-year-olds to go through the EMT program and complete their clinical experience in simulated labs at the Center for Health Science Education and Technology building, rather than going into the field, because they can't do clinicals in the field until they're 18, but they can do simulated experiences. It's kind of a case-by-case approval, but typically they do approve that for high school students if they let their instructor know early on in the semester, hey, I'm 17, I'm turning 18 in the summer. And so I can sit for my licensing exam in June or July, but right now I'm 17. In those cases, they'll permit it, but that's really the only exception. If they're just on the edge of turning 18, and are doing the EMT class like their last semester of high school. Otherwise, it wouldn't be approved. But other than that, that's a great question. Any health science program really requires that 18 age to participate in the programs. And usually on the application website, so you have to dig a little more, go to the website and look at the application. That is one of the requirements. They will spell it out.
And I think welding has a 16 limit, right, for safety reasons.
I think so. I'm actually not sure on that because I know we have our Career Start students do welding. And as far as I know, as long as they're in 11th grade, they can participate. I have had some younger students express interest in welding. I can check on that. I can make a note. I have not talked to the department chair explicitly about that, so I am not sure.
Okay. I mean, we usually have 16 plus, but every once in a while there's a 15-year-olds in our program.
Yeah, I will find out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So that's where, so I'll move in a little bit into other ways to test and place into classes. This comes up a lot too, where we have a lot of high achieving students participate in concurrent enrollment, and they've taken AP classes, for example. I have learned so much about how many AP and IB classes can be used for college credit, with our institution and certainly other institutions as well. But for example, if your student has taken like AP Lit, or I'm sorry, AP Lang as a junior, Lang in composition, and they passed their AP exam with a 3 or higher, they can then register for English 1022. They don't have to take the first like composition 1 at Pikes Peak. They've earned college credit for Comp 1 with that AP exam score and can move directly into Comp 2 at Pikes Peak. So I haven't really encountered this, but my fear is like students don't know that they've already met like the requirement through an AP score and are registering. But usually this comes up another way, and I can be like, wait, you've already got the college credit technically for Comp 1. We can just move you into Comp 2. So there's a lot of classes like that at Pikes Peak. Let me pull up another matrix. So we accept a ton of AP exams, for example, and this comes up a lot with AP Calc as well. So for example, like what I was just talking about, English composition, there we go. So AP English Lang and Comp, if they scored a 3 on that exam, they've earned college credit for English Comp 1 and can move into English Comp 2. Again, you or the student could share those AP exam scores with me, and I can use them to override prerequisite holds so that they can move into the next higher level class. If they're actually wanting the credit transcribed on their transcripts for the AP class, they can send their AP exam scores to records, to the records office at Pikes Peak. And then the records office will it's like a more formal process. They have to send those scores through AP or through College Board. And then the records office will put it on their Pikes Peak transcripts. If they're not interested in that and they just want to move into the next higher level class, they can share the scores with me, just for advising purposes. And then I just override the hold, but there's no record on their Pikes Peak transcript that they earned the credit. So students can do it either way. It's up to them. But this comes up a lot for English composition, and it comes up a lot for pre-calculus. So now that there's the AP pre-calc exam, if they score a 3, they earn college credit for pre-calc at Pikes Peak, and then they can register for Calc 1. Calc A, B, and BC. And so it's always dependent on the score that they earned, not on the grade that they earned in the class, like what's on their high school transcripts. I can't use that for placement. I can only use the AP exam score. So if they got a 3 on Calc BC, they earn credit for Calc 1. If they earned a 4, they earned credit for Calc 1 and Calc 2 at Pikes Peak and can move into Calc 3. This is certainly a very complicated advising process, and I'm always happy to collaborate or meet with these students that fall into this category, who are trying to use their AP or IB scores to move on into higher classes. So same thing if you're an IB school, they can place into higher level college classes because they've technically earned the college credit already from the IB exam that they participated in. We have a lot of students that choose to CLEP out of classes. That's certainly an option. Most of the minimums, it looks like 50s for the most part, a 59 for French 2. Because different institutions, like while these are what we require at Pikes Peak, it's possible that UCCS would require a score of 4 in order to earn credit for their Calc 1. So it just depends on the institution of what their minimum requirements are. And so I can speak to what ours are. You can also use like well, that's more for like seeing if the college credits will transfer. That's different. But this is certainly an option for students to place into classes as well if they're on the AP or IB pathway, or if they're CLEPing. CLEPing's becoming very popular. I have a lot of students that are opting to do that based on their background and knowledge. So that's certainly also an option, and we will accept those credits as well. And so probably good to get CLEP transcribed, but I can also use that just for class placement to move them into a higher class as well. Any questions on AP or IB placement using those scores? I think I see something in the chat. AP Lang, C or better. Good question, Jen. The students have to have scored a 3. So we can't evaluate their high school transcripts. If they got a 2, they would not be able to take 1022, but if they got a 3, they could take 1022. No problem. That's a really good question, Robin. Robin's asking how students are getting placed in world language classes. If they want to place into something higher than level 1, they do need to reach out to the department chair for the program for appropriate course placement. If they're not trying to test in with, like, for example, if they haven't taken if they haven't taken like an AP or IB exam and they're just saying, from my high school transcripts, I've taken 4 years of high school level Spanish, I would really like to start with college level Spanish 2 or Spanish 3. They do need to contact the department chair to express their background and expertise and knowledge or any experiences they've had with the language. And then that instructor, that department chair can place them higher. And that's a good point, Erin. Like they can contact Art if they feel that they're advanced as well. So that's not something that I'm able to override because I don't have the content knowledge. But I can certainly provide the connection, getting students connected to that correct person to get it overrided. And if ever a student receives permission from an instructor or a department chair to register, I can either help them register for that class or I can lift any holds. So as long as I have like an email with the instructor department chair saying, yep, they can take Spanish 2, or I mean, even if instructors are willing to overfill their classes, since we don't have a wait list, if students ever get something in writing from the instructor department chair, I'm more than happy to over enroll that class if the instructor has approved it. So I can help them get connected, but I can't be the one to make the decision of if they can jump into a higher level class if there's no scores corresponding with it. So something else I want to share, kind of going back to that, that so many students use their credits at Pikes Peak to transfer on. I also use this website a ton for those degrees with designation, where I can see exactly which institutions in Colorado are going to accept our degree. So we were looking at biology earlier. So this is the actual like agreement that exists between community and state colleges and four-year colleges. It's taking a long time to load. I will be patient. So what I like about this is it is saying, yes, if you get your AS in biology from Pikes Peak, you can transfer all of your credits to these participating institutions. So you may find that on the different sheets that exist, not every four-year public school in Colorado is on the list. They choose to opt in, how they, large conversations that don't happen with me, but between like the governing bodies of the state colleges and the four-year colleges. So I can say to a student, are you considering these schools? And if yes, if these are on your top choices list, then what you're taking through Pikes Peak is going to transfer over. Because oftentimes we have students that are wanting to transfer out of state, pursue private institutions, and that's totally, absolutely fine. I just always want to make sure students know how to research if their credits will transfer. And if their school is not on this list, then I always direct them to contact that institution directly if transferring their credits is very important to them. I know some students are trying to demonstrate rigor for highly selective colleges that may not take their credits anyway. But if they're really wanting to get a jump start on their bachelor's degree, I want them to know if their credits are transferring. And every institution has a transfer office. Often they have someone that specializes in, high school students that are transferring their college credits in. So there's always going to be someone at a four-year college that a student can reach out to and just say, hey, this is my plan. This is what I'm doing. I want to make sure that you're going to take my credits. And they'll be honest and tell them what will transfer and what won't. So what you'll find on these sheets is they match what you see in our degree check perfectly. Like they're completely aligned. So what's on here is going to be exactly what's on this document. So I do go over these with students just depending on their goals. If this is their goal to transfer in state to another school, it's a really great option for students to participate in. I will do a plug for the Ascent program and TREP program. So students who, for Ascent, if they've completed 9 college credits, and that can include AP classes or IB classes, but they do have to get the classes transcribed. So sending those classes, their AP scores to the records office to earn credit for them. If they have 9 credits or more, they can participate and get another year of college paid for by the school district to get them closer to finishing an associate's before transferring. So that's an option for Ascent, and they can participate in any degree or certificate that we offer, as long as they're completing classes. Like, so if they're that biology student, as long as they're completing classes on this list during their Ascent year, they can complete any degree, and they can change their major, but as long as they've changed their major in the system, they can continue with those classes. So that's an option for students who want to continue on as a retained 5th year senior, or students can do the TREP program, and that's for students who want to go into teaching specifically, and that's a 2-year program. So that would be for students who are wanting to be to work toward an early childhood or elementary, or like UCCS, for example, has different content areas, like secondary content areas. So if students wanted to work toward a history major at Pikes Peak so that they could finish history and their education certification through UCCS or another institution, that's also an option. But most commonly I see it with elementary education, degree with designation. But since students who are studying a content area for secondary education, they're really having to do like the content portion. So that's also an option as well for students who are wanting to go into education in the future. And for TREP, they only have to have 1 college class completed, 3 credits. It's a different list. It's like English or communications or education courses. There's a list on CDHE's website of classes that are approved. We don't have a ton of students in TREP right now. It's definitely a program that I think could grow potentially. But yeah, so those are 2 programs that students can use to continue as a 5th year or a 6th year for TREP to continue earning college credit. any questions on transfer degree process, advising transfer students, or TREP Ascent? Awesome. Well, I know that that was a lot of information, but really those are the tools that I really wanted to share with you. The last one I want to show you is just how to support students like in picking their classes and like their student portal. And for those of you that now have Navigate access, being able to see my advising notes and having a little more information about the classes that students are registered for. So I do want to show you those two things really quickly. And then I'll leave a few minutes for questions at the very end. So on as soon as Monday, the 21st, you can sit with your students and you can see what classes are available to register for, but registration does not officially open until the 28th of October. And a lot of classes do fill up fast, so if they're able to register early, that's great. I do go into schools and offer on-site advising. So I'm going to go visit Miami Yoder. I'm going to visit some schools in D38, Palmer Ridge, and Lewis Palmer. I go to Rampart. So if you would like me to come in and advise your students in person, I'm happy to do that. I can block the day, and often counselors just arrange the schedule of who's coming in based on what works for students. But that is a resource just to, you know, help meet students where they're at. Otherwise, I typically do virtual advising for students. Since I'm often traveling and at different campuses, I've found that that's just the easiest way. And then their parents can often join in from work or wherever else they are. And so that seems to work really well. So if you'd like me to do that for your students, I'm happy to come in person, or they can sign up to meet with me virtually. I don't think anyone on the call is Courtney's partner, but if you worked with Courtney, then you would connect with her for advising. But when registration opens, students can either use Navigate to register for classes, this like add drop portion. I don't have a student facing side of this, so it's hard to do a demo, but often students really like to register using this. I also, from like the other way is students add and drop classes. And this is where I can see exactly all the classes that are offered for that semester by doing a class search. And so spring's not open yet, but that's where I could see for that student who wants college biology, where the classes are located, what days and what times. And so I always tell students to look at location first. PA is always going to be the Centennial campus for our Aspen building. So if that's not a good fit for them, they want to go to Rampart, they're looking for PRR. And then we do have these online options as well. So I always tell them to look at that first, and then they can go look at the days and times that it's offered, who's teaching, if they have a preference on their instructor, and then the days and times that it's offered. And often, as you all know, the semester isn't going to align as perfectly as like when the high school is starting and ending. So the students are going to have to manage two calendars. But again, this is something that you would access with the student together to see what their options are, and to determine, because technically this is like in the student portal, which advisors don't or counselors don't have access to. So I think it is easiest to sit with a student and do it together, or just direct the student on how to do this. If they've done it a couple times or even once, often they're able to navigate it independently. But this is the screens that I use once registration is open to say, okay, we know what you need to take for your major. Now we're working around your high school schedule and your other obligations. What can we fit in that's going to feel not overwhelming, and that you can either travel to or take online? And often that really kind of makes or breaks their choices and when the classes are offered. So they could be like, I really want to take biology, and then it's not going to work with their schedule. So then we can go, okay, what other prerequisites do you need for nursing? Is there a different one that we can knock out this semester? And those kinds of things. So really that's when all the fun begins, once we can see what the class options are for students. So this is another tool that I use. So again, if you're able to log in with a student, this is what I do when I come to schools with students. And then I don't actually register the students. I try to train them on how to register and guide them so that they feel confident doing it. And often they need a little bit of time to just kind of process all of their choices, talk to their parents. So I don't want them to feel like they have to walk away having registered. I just want them to walk away knowing how to register and what their choices are, so that they have some time to think that through with their families. Any questions? I'm gonna go the last thing I'll go over is navigate, but any questions about when the schedule opens up, you can see it the 21st, registration starts the 28th, and students will log into their student portal to register for their classes, either using their course planning, add, drop, and withdraw, or by going into kind of the back end registration screen that I just showed you. Any questions about this? Classes are on site. That's a good question, Jen. So if you have college Pikes Peak classes running on your high school, my office, high school programs will always register your students for those because they're closed sections. They're never going to be viewable on the ad screen because they're private for your high school. So we will always register your students for those classes. And that usually doesn't happen until a little bit closer to winter break. But this is more if they're registering for anything that's happening on a Pikes Peak campus. So if they're taking something in addition to those classes, excluding Career Start, because we will also register your Career Start students. They do not need to do that. But if there's anything extra that they want to take, then it would be the student's responsibility to register for those. But they don't need to register for anything. Yeah, if it's happening on your high school or Career Start. Yep. So I think everyone on the call, maybe not, if you don't have access to Navigate as an advisor and you want access to it for your students, send me an email and let me know, because we have a new opportunity for high school counselors to be able to see their students. Another tool called Navigate, which is where what I use to make advising notes for students. You can also see what classes students are registered for. I will show you kind of briefly what that looks like. I'm not in here because I am. Let's see. It doesn't look quite right. Just to honor FERPA, I don't want to show a student example, so maybe I'll see if our mascot is available. Yay! So this is kind of like a dummy account just for educational purposes. But now we have an agreement where counselors can access this screen and Navigate, so you can see a student's progress at Pikes Peak. You can see their GPA, you can see the credits they've earned. So this is something you can log into without the student. So instead of having to sit with them and go through their degree check, since this is only accessible to the student, in this case, you have access to this anytime that you want to log in. So it can show you what their major is, what their student number is, if you're not sure. And often I know counselors need to know what classes that their students are registered for to make sure they're, fully full-time as a high school student. So this is where you could see, what did my student actually register for after we met and had this whole advising process, because often you don't know what the outcome is if they didn't register right then and there, or if they decided to drop a class later. So you could see exactly what they've taken. You can see their final grades when they post to see if they were successful. I know that we also share the grades with you all, but this is like another way to check that. You can also see if we've received their test scores. And if they have any academic alerts, you would be able to see that. Moving forward, I will always give counselors a heads up if there's an alert, but then you'd be able to log in and access what that alert is actually for. And if the student has met with me for advising, you would be able to see my notes and what we talked about and any recommendations that I made to the student, as well as if the student has a FERPA waiver on file. So that means if the parent is able to talk to me or others on campus, that information would also be here. So it really does kind of help streamline the communication and make counselors more aware of just what's going on with each of their students. So this is an option. So if you don't have access to this, send me an email and there's just a contract that we have counselors sign. There's a quick 5-minute video tutorial on different components of it. And then from there, you're able to access this information for your students. We piloted it last year with District 20 and made some adjustments based on that, since we've never had this opportunity before. And so now we've launched it for all of our high school partners. And I think it's a really a good thing for everyone. So this is also there, and that's part of what makes advising complicated is there's just so many different, by the end of the day, I have about 45 tabs open on my computer because I've just accessed so many different documents and screens because every student's journey and experience is different, and I just have to access different resources for each of them. But yeah, so this is really the information that I wanted to make sure everybody walked away with, knowing how to access the catalog, that this is really the best first stop source of resource for any of our degrees and programs, and that there's a ton of different content here. If you want to look at our policies and things like that, that's also an option. That students have this degree check, which I think is fantastic because they can self-advise if they don't even meet with an advisor. If students want to change their major, there's a form on our website for them to fill out. I can share that with them, but they're able to change their major as many times as they want, or if they picked the wrong major when they applied, they can certainly do that. I shared this site with you, the transfer degree website for any students who are considering transferring. This is a really great resource as well. And then just this, this is exactly what the student portal is going to look like for your students. So just helping them navigate it, and using Navigate to register for classes, or going into the back end and adding and dropping classes that way either is fine. And accessing this screen and then Navigate. So it's a lot. And we're more than happy to help answer questions as you go through this with students because we recognize that it's a big undertaking and a big learning curve to go through all of it. So I'm here as a resource if you need anything as you start advising for spring. Let me know if you'd like me to come to your school and advise your students. Yeah. And so we've got 7 minutes left, so I'll leave it for questions, but if you don't have any questions, you are free to move on with your day, and I really appreciate your time. I will stop sharing. Let's see, is there any difference in registration process or prerequisite requirements? No, it's just that each class and each program is going to have different prerequisite requirements. And so I think that as long as they're viewing the catalog and making sure that they're meeting those prerequisites, it doesn't depend on the certificate or program. It's just course by course is what those requirements are going to be. And the registration process wouldn't be any different. They're just going to get a registration hold if their test scores are not on file. So if a student tries to register and it won't let them, it means they haven't met the prerequisite. So they're welcome to contact me and I can look into it a little further, or they can share their scores with me and then I can lift those holds for them. Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. So feel free to log off. I'll stay on a few more minutes if anyone has any questions. Yes, I will send you a link to the recording as soon as I learn how to download and share it out, or if there's a place that I need to upload it to for everyone.